battle for the soul of our constitutional republic is brewing at the United States Supreme Court, with 2 different cases coming up from the lower federal courts about whether we are going to tolerate the unbridled pursuit of raw power by Donald Trump at the expense of the other 2 branches, or do we want what Justice Louis Brandeis back in the 1920s said was that friction that's required between the 3 co-equal branches of government in order to have our checks and balance system and stop our march towards an imperial absolute dictator. Which is it, Supreme Court? There were going to be 3 cases, but 1 case led by Hampton Dellinger to try to get himself restored to power as the special counsel to protect federal workers is now gone forever. We'll tell you why on Unprecedented, a new show on the Legal AF YouTube channel devoted to the United States Supreme Court with DIna, Sayegh, Dahl, and me, Michael Popok. Here's an After Dark clip. You want to jump into the couple of Supreme Court decisions that we have an oral argument to talk about, about how that went. We can sort of, frame it all with that introduction. Why don't you take the, to of course take the lead about the ruling that we got against the Trump administration one day, and then another ruling for the Trump administration the next day.
So great news with the Supreme Court ruling against Trump. I mean, we've kind of been waiting with bated breath, right? Because so many of these justices are in Trump's corner. But as you said, Justice Amy Coney Barrett, we were always holding out hope, and Chief Justice Roberts as well, because he cares about the institution of the Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court came down on the side of the groups who sued, saying, all this money you are stopping basically from going to us that you already promised you would pay us for work we have already done. Trump came in, Musk came in and said, we're stopping this money. Of course, as we see, they did it with urgency, no review, no thoroughness, et cetera, et cetera. And so they sued. These groups sued. And it was, they went to the Supreme Court, and Chief Justice Roberts, along with Amy Coney Barrett and the rest of the liberal justices, side with the groups and basically said, yes, you have to abide by the lower court's injunction, which was to allow the flow of the money, about $2 billion in aid, to go as promised. And so this was a win. We have seen, this is not the only time the Supreme Court has stopped Trump. We saw it also within the Dellinger case, where they kind of put a pause on his firing. Trump wanted them to have this emergency appeal overturning it, and they denied that. And so this case, the Chief Justice Roberts said, to the lower courts, make it clear. You have to make it clear how they need to abide by the order, but go ahead and do that. Lower court, make it very clear how they need to pay out these funds. And Justice Alito had, in his opinion, I'm actually going to quote it, because tell me if you think this sounds a lot like Musk on X, right? I mean, my gosh, it could have been word for word. He says, does a single district court judge who likely lacks jurisdiction have the unchecked power to compel the government of the United States to pay out and probably lose forever $2 billion taxpayer dollars? The answer to that question should be an emphatic no. Okay, so that was very similar language that we saw here. So here's the thing we've been talking about. Is it a constitutional crisis? Well, if you have a Supreme Court who literally thinks a judge can't do that either, and they're the ones who decide what the Constitution is, that's not a constitutional crisis. Thankfully, Justice Alito is in the minority. But him mimicking that language so closely is, oh my gosh, it's almost like he's become unshackled. I think that Trump MAGA right Supreme Court justices aren't even pretending anymore. Such a political statement on his part about the American taxpayer money. It was so political. But the problem is for those of us who have been, or for those of the Midas community who have been following our show, we talked about this idea of a district court judge making a decision that affects the entire country. This is not new. This is called universal injunctions. It is how our law functions. It's how our law functions in some ways, because otherwise it'd be very confusing, right? if a California judge said a federal law worked a certain way, and a Massachusetts said it worked a certain way, and they both issued opposing injunctions. I mean, there is a way to try to resolve that dispute. We have a way in the law, but really it's confusing. And so we allow for universal injunctions because if the law is unconstitutional or illegal in California, it should be illegal everywhere because we're talking about a federal law, right? And not a state law. And the Supreme Court had a very recent chance to address this universal injunction, as we talked about in this show, in January when they had the anti-money laundering case, if you remember Popok. And it was Biden's administration who actually asked the Supreme Court to address the universal injunctions because they didn't like it there. And we were saying, hey, we want these universal injunctions. Don't stop them because we need them under Trump, right? And this is a perfect example. In this case, one district judge did protect U.S. aid around everywhere because of their one thing. So the Supreme Court in January declined to address the issue of the universal injunctions. And it was only Justice Gorsuch who actually came out in a concurring opinion there and said, I think we should take this up. We should decide universal injunctions once and for all. Justice Alito was silent in that case. He was not so outraged about one single district judge doing something with anti-money laundering. He didn't come and say it in his opinion and, be on his soapbox. He was silent. All of a sudden, he's outraged about this. Well, Justice Alito, it's the hypocrisy, their unwillingness to be consistent in their policies. If you really cared that much, you could have helped, at least talked about it in January, insisted on it. So it's, to me, like as a lawyer, we're looking at this. In some ways, I want to give them the benefit of the doubt, right? I want to believe that we just have differences of opinion about interpreting the law. But when you are so inconsistent in that way, and you're so outraged when it comes to an universal injunction with Trump, and you mimic the same thing Musk says, but just a month and a half ago, you declined to even make a peep about it when it was a universal injunction, not about Trump. That is why you lose the credibility, right, of the American people when you do those kind of acts.
Yeah, I mean, a court accountability action, which does a lot of great work here on Legal AF, Lisa Graves and Alex Aronson, Mike Saxonall, they are convinced, and they've convinced me that what we're watching with the right wing of the 4 votes of the Supreme Court, Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, Alito, and Thomas, especially Alito, are monarchists who believe in the imperial president. See, it all fits their worldview. Alito's got a special thing for Joneses for imperial monarchs in Europe. He likes to go in his summer vacations and run around in velvet and ermine minks. I'm not making this up, with giant badges, and celebrate with other, I'm not attacking his religion, but other Catholic monarchists. This is like his thing. And it infects. The reason I care about it is not because I don't care what you do, what your hobby is.
Yeah. Right.
Right. And you want to traipse around with like counts and countesses in Europe, that's fine. But if it infects your legal decision-making and analysis and historical references, that's the problem with Alito. He's so upside down about what makes America great and the Constitution. He's so far outside the mainstream of constitutional scholars, and most of his thinking is that's why you and I can't make heads or tails sometimes about the decision making, because we think we understand where they're coming from, but oh no, they'll just completely flip a different way, led by an Alito. When it comes to the presidential power, it's a scary group on the 4. The only thing that's holding the center at all, if the center is going to hold here, it's it's Roberts and it's Amy Coney Barrett. And we've said this last year and the year before. Well, last year on Unprecedented, it's the rise of the Amy Coney. This is becoming the Amy Coney Barrett court. New York Times just did a piece on it just today. I still get the newspaper. People think that's so quaint that I actually have this thing called a paper in my hand. But here's the topic. Here's the headline. Barrett's voice may be crucial in Trump cases. A justice breaks ranks with conservatives. We saw it. We saw it last term where she would chastise Alito and Thomas and tell them, your historical analysis for gun rights, for any kind of thing, looking back to old-timey times to try to figure out whether there's an analog from our ancestors, our antecedents, is ridiculous. Welcome back. That's a show. We invented it. We do it in one place exclusively on Legal AF on this YouTube channel. If you like that, give us a thumbs up, but also hit the subscribe button as we continue our march to 500,000 subscribers before the weekend is over, really. We talk about everything related to the United States Supreme Court. We do a full 360-degree review inside the court, oral arguments, decisions, emergency applications, the shadow docket, ethical issues and problems, and things that are on the horizon and on the radar screen for the United States Supreme Court. We handicap how that's going to work out with our best estimates as constitutional scholars and as people that practice law in these very federal courts. So until my next Unprecedented with DIna Sayegh Dahl, this is Michael Popok. I'm Michael Popok, and I got some big news for our audience. Most of you know me as the co-founder of Midas Touch's Legal AF and the Legal AF YouTube channel, or as a 35-year national trial lawyer. Now, building on what we started together on Legal AF, I've launched a new law firm, the Popok Firm, dedicated to obtaining justice through compassionate and zealous legal representation. At the Popok Firm, we are focused on obtaining justice for those who have been injured or damaged by a life-altering event by securing the highest dollar recoveries. I've been tirelessly fighting for justice for the last 35 years, so my own law firm organically building on my Legal AF work just feels right. And I've handpicked a team of top-tier trial fighters and settlement experts throughout all 50 states known as big auto injury attorneys who have the know-how to beat heartless insurance companies, corporations, government entities, and their attorneys. Big Auto's attorneys working with my firm are rock stars in their respective states and collectively responsible for billions of dollars in recoveries. So if you or a loved one have been on the wrong side of a catastrophic auto, motor vehicle, rideshare, or truck accident, suffered a personal injury, or been the victim of medical malpractice, employment harassment or discrimination, or suffered a violation of your civil and constitutional rights, then contact the Popok Firm today at 1-877-POPOK-AF or by visiting my website at www.thepopokfirm.com and fill out a free case evaluation form. And if we determine that you have a case and you sign with us, we don't get paid unless you do. The Popok Firm, fighting for your justice every step of the way.